everybody. Welcome again. I'm sitting down today with Cameron Bartlett, who is an amazing digital marketer in the nonprofit world. He's worked with organizations like News Story, IJM, Compassion International, World Vision, and Cure, and is currently the VP of Performance Marketing at Stop Soldier Suicide. Cameron, stoked to have you here. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about yourself and how you got here?
Yeah, thanks, John. This is so great that we're getting a chance to talk. Yeah, I started my career in music industry. It's what brought me to Nashville, where I am now originally. And then I started working with marketing agencies and as a consultant, like just those you're working late into the night in an agency with like 20 clients and they've got a ping pong table and snacks. So they just like never want you to leave. They just want you to live there. But I started to think like, could these same strategies that are helping to make these companies a bunch of money and help them grow a bunch, like, could we do the same thing to help nonprofits fundraise? And so I got my first opportunity to work with a nonprofit with International Justice Mission, or IJM, and just led some of the most some of the most memorable, meaningful campaigns of my career. Still, some that even went on to win some awards and so forth. And um, I was able to kind of test that theory, and it worked. If you could create the similar to how you'd create a customer journey for a company, create these donor journeys that were these integrated digital marketing campaigns, you could fundraise a lot more, by creating these dynamic steps and sequences and so forth, and following up with people over a longer period of time based on their behaviors. It worked really well. And so I took those same kind of strategies and I brought them to other organizations like Compassion and some of the ones you mentioned, even some cool innovative ones like News Story, who are like 3D printing homes and stuff, which is really cool. And
Yeah.
now I've been really excited to join the team here at Stop Soldier Suicide and just work on some really wild campaigns. In fact, one cool thing, Javin, about Stop Soldier Suicide is that so many people have fundraised for them on Facebook, which is just the wildest thing. Like, I'd be stoked if you could find it, like 100 people to fundraise for a nonprofit on Facebook or on just their peer-to-peer fundraiser on their website or something like that. But for SSS, something like, I just looked at the numbers. There was 1.2 million people have signed up and said, "Yeah, I'll do it. I'll not just
Mm.
fundraise, but I'll like run 100 miles this month, and
Yeah.
or I'll do like 400 push-ups, and or whatever else, right? Like they're just doing all these wild things while fundraising, and so it's really cool to now take what is this like incredible momentum and say, all right, how do we now build these sustainable systems of creating a donor journey and building a recurring donor program and all of those different things. And so I'm really excited to be doing that now.
Yeah, that's so cool. We have a similar kind of journey into this space, right? Mine was with Invisible Children, where it was the same idea, going from an agency to like, but what if we didn't sell golf shoes and laptops and
Mhm.
pitch alcohol companies, but it's for something that actually matters. And then my move went to Invisible Children, it was the same, right? Where you're seeing such life change with digital products and focus on digital strategy that I just could not go back, right? The idea that you can have an agency space or a consulting space where you have belief in what's being built, I think at that time was pretty revolutionary. I think today you've got a lot more
Yeah.
people who buy into that reality that you don't have to sell your soul in the work you do. But at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of people leading that charge for us. So I'm stoked we were able to make it through that.
It's
Um,
really cool.
and also Facebook surprised me a lot too. I think we're constantly looking for new trends and new places to go, but it always surprised me when we look at the analytics how powerful Facebook still is, how much market share it still has, and whether that's the female leaning or age range, whatever it is. When you're doing fundraising, a lot more comes from Facebook than you would expect, and you see a lot of people kind of starting to try to be more cutting edge and move away from some of the traditional maybe social media pieces, but that's still one that's quite a powerhouse, at least in the organizations we're working with too.
It's wild. Like it's not just like start fundraisers on Instagram and all of a sudden it's going to take off. It's like, but what is really cool about if you already have a great acquisition program that's bringing in new people who are becoming donors, or in SSS's, what they've done is actually targeted people and asked them to do a fundraiser right out of the gate, which is such a wild thing that people will do it.
Yeah.
But also like when you're tied into how the platform actually uh, promotes those notifications that your friend is doing a fundraiser and that you should give to it and so forth, like that that in addition to the good work you're already doing, like it can really make a campaign go so much further, which is just it's so cool that they've been able to make that work over the years, and that still today, like so many people are doing it for this one organization, which is really cool.
Yeah. And it's really cool when you can blend the kind of digital and in-person pieces too. I don't know if you guys can do that much right now, but being a dad, my kids are doing fundraisers for their school to see how like
Mm-hmm.
wild the classrooms can get at being excited to raise money and get little, just the tiniest little things, these tiny little like what's in it for the kids moments where they're getting a little foam ball or whatever else. But their school is literally, as of this week, like in overdrive,
Yeah.
coming home like, we got to do it, we got to raise money. When did you send the email to grandma and grandpa? Like that fervor, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you have a story or a process or a system that gets people that excited, especially when it's all digital? It's a little trickier, but really exciting
Yeah.
when the digital and the in-person gel together. You can just create movements, which you and I have seen in the places we've worked. IJM definitely had movements at
Yeah.
times. Invisible Children had movements. So to see that all gel together, such a
Absolutely.
beautiful part of our job that we get to be a part of. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
really
let's
neat.
jump into it. We had a few questions we wanted to go through, so let's get in there. I know you are on the cutting edge when it comes to fundraising and techniques that people are using, some trends. So I'd love to just take a quick snapshot of 2024 and what you're seeing this year that's different. What are the trends? What's happening?
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to start with just what isn't changing this year, because I think it's important to not just pick up the new trendy thing, but also do what is really working first. And so the first thing I would say is like assess what is already working for your organization and keep doing that, and leave testing as, something that you're doing like 30% of the time or 20 or 10% of the time. For I had a friend who now is at the Washington Post, but was at IGM before me, and he had always had this testing model of like 70% of the time do what works, 20% of the time test new things, and 10% of the time test things that nobody else is like even thinking about, like testing something
Mm,
completely new. But the things that I see that work really well, of course, are building out those compelling donor journeys and doing an integrated fundraising campaign and evergreen campaign as well. So the things that are going on continually, and making sure that they're all connected to your evergreen, always going donor journey, right? So you're taking time to set up. If someone comes in as a new donor, you have email automations that are welcoming those new donors as you're generating not just new donors, but also giving people an opportunity if they are interested in your organization, but aren't ready to give yet, that they become a lead, that they have a form they can fill out, not just like something at the bottom of your website, but something that you're giving them something in exchange for that lead generation opportunity.
yeah.
Like, hey, yeah, we'll give you this thing to download. So making sure you're generating leads and then putting them through the right kind of automations with emails, with ads, and then you're creating what I call celebration content. So I've talked about this quite a bit,
Mm,
but just content that's showing the impact that you're making, and thanking donors for that, like thanking them that they are making that difference, and showing that in social posts and emails on your website, like everywhere, right? And just using that as an opportunity to just thank donors and get them ready for times throughout the year when you'll do campaigns. The things that I'm seeing that are new, again, I'm always coming from the for-profit side and working in agencies. I'm always trying to find ways to bring what like fast-growing companies are doing to the nonprofit world. And something I've seen in the tech industry for a while are these B2B sales strategies that you could totally adopt with your fundraising team, mostly in your major donor side. And so those who are mid-level and major donors, anywhere that you're working where you're doing more one-to-one kind of marketing, as opposed to mass fundraising. I would You can set up, instead of just sending out one outreach email, you could set up through your CRM an opportunity to send out a series of emails, right? So not just, I'm not talking about marketing emails, but rather your like one-to-one outreach. HubSpot has a feature called sequences that you can do this, and so we're building those out at SSS. We'll be doing that this year, building out ways for our team to send out not just one email, but then set up other reminders in between there, like send an email, connect with them on LinkedIn, send them an email if like they're not responding to your email, send another email after a couple weeks or a month or something like that. We're also then setting up automations to remind our team to reach out after a certain amount of time. So as opposed to just like, oh, I should probably reach out because we have something to talk about, set up those times throughout the year that and set a good cadence of you actually following up and sharing good news and good content and so forth. And one way that we're doing that also is we're creating this whole like years worth of content in a HubSpot automation that's going to segment our audiences based on their behaviors and the ways that they engage with us, and also just their giving levels, so that there are different emails that are going out every month, and we have it planned ahead of time. So there's never a time where we're not just engaging, thanking, and sending these like evergreen good emails to our audiences, and we're really excited to create that. But if you can't create a whole year's worth of emails, what you could do is just create a series that goes out for a few weeks or a month or a few months. And the further out that you spread that content, every time you're creating that automation, you're not having to do that again, right? Like that one email is now going to be sent out for every new donor, every new lead that comes in, every new person for now a series of months. And you're not having to worry about, oh, did we send an email this month, or did we send that newsletter or something like that? It's
Yeah.
already automatedly going out, and that's going to save you so much time and allow you to fundraise a lot more. A lot of stuff in there, I know,
Yeah, no, it's
but
perfect. I mean, I think anyway, HubSpot in particular, love HubSpot. Anytime HubSpot's mentioned when we're doing RFPs or we're looking to work with people, that's far and away from a value perspective, time perspective, ease of use. HubSpot's such a powerful tool. They're not a
mhm.
sponsor. That's just a pitch from my
I
perspective
know,
too.
right?
It's fantastic, and we do use it both with Donately and 50 and 50. But really empowering to just step in, be able to quickly build lists, build those segments, build the automations and
Yeah.
workflows, and fantastic tool. And I think what's changed now is the barrier of entry. Now, HubSpot is a little pricey for smaller organizations. It does have the free side of things where you can do a lot of that work on the free license. It's just the CRM, but to what you're talking about, it does have a barrier in terms of cost. But mid-sized organizations, so worth the investment. Make that happen. A lot of tools like Donately, Fundraise Up, the different tools will integrate with that as well, so you can have really rich user experiences that then pull that data into HubSpot. Great analytics built into it too. Anyway, we'll stop there. I love too that you had that kind of 70-80% rule. We do the same. We typically lean a little safer. We kind of do 80-20, 80% on whatever's working
Sure.
best, and about 20% trying to find
Yeah.
what's next. And if you can beat that acquisition cost and lifetime value from what's working, right? So if you can try something and shave it down a bit, great, then let's implement it. If it doesn't, then let's kick it out and not operationalize that. We'll just try something new. So love that. Also love that idea of balancing what you're asking of people, right? That every email, every social post is not a request to receive donations, but it's a back and forth, right? Where you're telling stories, you're nurturing relationships. It's not all take, take. And we can see an adverse effect when we
Mhm.
push that boundary and we go too far and we send 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 that are requests for giving. You start to see that genuine relationship start to diminish. So big fan of that idea of giving back to the donor and really paying attention to that back and forth relationship, right? Like, what are you giving them? That's a push we have to do quite a bit in our strategic conversations. Is this isn't getting money is not the relationship, right? What are they going to get out of it? It's not just that they get to
Mhm.
give to your story, but they either are wanting to be a part of your narrative, or there's something that they want that's a little more than that, and you need to dig into that, whether that's being invited to galas, whether that's community. There's a lot of places that can go, and sometimes it's just, you know, repping a t-shirt. Like, it can be so many different things, but if you think that just giving is all they need, you're leaving a lot of money on the table from people who need a little bit of that nudge. And you talked about that too, that idea of like a sales process, right? Let Help these organizations be more like a for-profit organization, somebody who treats marketing leading to sales, sales leading to revenue. I think the time where nonprofits didn't have to think that way is going away. It's just so competitive, and there's so many social enterprises out there that people feel like they're giving back just by buying something from Cotopaxi or buying their jackets from Patagonia. So nonprofits are entering a storytelling world where I think that idea of just giving to somebody is getting tighter and tighter.
Without like reward for that, right? Like without
Yeah.
the time where people are able to, without you showing their impact and thanking them for it, and like making that really clear connection between their giving or even their potential giving if they're not giving yet to what impact they could make. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. When I think too, when we talk about things that have changed, I think more recently, I felt like the technology has started to catch up. We talked about HubSpot and a lot of the donation platforms and tools that people are using, connecting to those. In my mind, technology is kind of becoming less of the roadblock to donor engagement and increasing revenue. I'd be curious your perspective. Do you feel like the technology's kind of gotten to a place where that's less of the problem, or is that still one of the big hangups?
I mean, I think one, the technology it allows us to do so much more if you have the right tech in place. I think what can be difficult is often like leaving old tech that isn't working, right? I think there's a it's a big process to switch to something else
Yeah.
sometimes. So luckily, but it's like the opportunity cost. Like it's costing you so much more to be sticking with old tech than than it would be for you to, than you what you would be able to make if you switched, right? And I think it's so important to recognize that. And it's not just having the new tech though. Like it's how you use it. Like I was just having a good conversation with somebody who was like, talking about how you don't need to like necessarily buy some big fancy software to fix all of your problems. Like a lot of times it's the processes that are already in place and how you're using it. But I also think like it's important that um, when you look at like the little details, so like let's talk about fundraising software for instance, right? Like if every donation that comes through, say that you get 100 donors a month, or say you get $100,000 a month, like whatever size of organization you are, every donation that comes in, there's frictions that could be in place there, and there are things that can make it easier, right? And so if that 100 could turn into 150 or 120, even there's like a little bit of an increase, like that would make a big difference for you. If you are bringing in thousands of donors, that could mean hundreds more that could be coming in if your tech is actually easier for people to use. It's upselling people to recurring donations. It's making it really easy for people to use and engage and make the right payment processors and all of those things. Like if your tech isn't doing that for your fundraising software, for instance, you're missing out on donations. You're missing out on people who would maybe give recurring if it upsold them properly. And also you're missing opportunities for tools that have really great ways to help retain donors as well, because honestly, like that to me is a really important place to start, and like would love to go into kind of some of what Donately is doing to help with some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we talked a little bit earlier, it was around kind of the data and the ability for platforms like Donately to look across all the different clients and look at what's working and what's not. And so I think that's really powerful. So from where we sit, it's really being able to analyze different forms. We have some technology that helps us look at what is each form doing, how many form fields are in there, time on site, how fast it's loading. We get to look at all that data to then craft what we build out and deliver as the kind of core forms and core functionality inside of Donately. Another thing we've done is just built a ton of flexibility to it. So recognizing that smaller forms perform better, and then recognizing that there was a bit of a data entry commitment that once people have started a form, they're more committed to finishing it, prompted us to a few years back to add the kind of multi-step functionality where you can add a few fields and a few fields and a few fields. And really a lot of what we're doing, you have the ability to do on your end as well. So Donately's integration with Google Analytics can help you recognize of all the data that's coming in when you're looking at your conversions inside of analytics, which ones are performing better than others, and make your own decisions too, that hey, this form that we built out was a lot longer, and because of it our average donations were lower, or our conversion rate was lower, and really be able to let you pressure test one form against the next. And we really pride ourselves on being able to build out forms more custom than most of the platforms that are out there, right? A lot of them that we see, they've dialed this in and they've done a really good job, and they've used the back end data like I'm talking about to kind of say, hey, this is the best form, the best converting form. But for Donately, our view on it is that we know some of that, and then the only way you're going to know more of that is to really get into the process yourself, do a couple campaigns, see what works, see what doesn't, and utilize the analytics in the platform and on platforms like Google to tell you more information there on what's working and what's not. So a lot of really powerful stuff nowadays that you can do with that data. And just like you said, if you're not paying attention to that, A/B testing, trying a few things, you're definitely leaving some opportunities on the table to kind of inch what might raise you $100,000 could raise you 130, 140 if you're being smart about what the data is telling you.
Love it. Yeah, I think like what I love that the fact that you as a tech company, as a nonprofit tech company that is bringing in working with so many different nonprofits, having so many donors to each of those nonprofits come in, is that you get to see from this view like a bunch of different things happening at once, and you get to optimize your product based on what you're learning about that. I love that. So I just know like if I'm using a product like this that you guys are continually finding ways to optimize it. I love also that you mentioned, I know it's like that you could, that there's so much customization involved in it that you can do a bunch of testing yourself. Like I think the best thing that you can do is to test everything. Like just
Yeah.
test every little thing. I mean, that goes back to like when I was working at those agencies where we would like test the different colors of buttons. Like, you know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
And like you test, we did this test with, IJM, go back there for a second, like with I was their social media manager, and we were trying to figure out what gets the best engagement. And when I started, it was like we had I don't know, maybe like a 800 likes on a post was like pretty good, like on average, right? And we had an audience of like a few hundred thousand people on Facebook, for instance, or Instagram or things like that. And we started uh, just figuring out like all the little details. I would look at a social post, let's take Instagram, and I would say, what if was this an image or was it a video, right? That's a really binary option. Like, is it one of those two? But
Yeah.
then each of those told me so much more. Like, was it a tall image? Was it a wide image? Was it a square image? In the image, were there people? Was it landscapes? Do we have text on the photo? How much text do we have on the photo? Do we use emojis
Yeah.
in the caption? How long was the caption? How many characters? Like, what words stood out to it? Like, we just started digging into every little detail of a post. Like, what's the sentiment? What's the tone? Like, what are we conveying here? We learned like if we um, use the tall photo with like bright colors in it, people's faces in it, and we put in the first line what exactly we were like celebrating or talking about. If we put text over the photo that was like under a certain amount of characters, like all of those things ended up with us starting to increase the amount of engagement. We would get like 1,000 and like 2,000, and then within a
Mm.
year we went from like 800 to 1,000 likes on like some of our best posts to like 5,000. And then in the second year, we kept growing it even more. It was like 10,000, 20, 30, up to 40,000 engagements on a single post just because we
Mm.
had continued to find that formula that worked, kept testing every little element of it, and then put those together to make these like super posts that would go out and get a ton of engagement. But you can do that same thing with emails and your subject lines and see how many characters, what words should you use emojis, how many, which ones, which words should come first. Should you use someone's name in it? Like all those different things could be subject lines. You should, do that with your, landing pages on your website to determine like how long should it be, how descriptive, how, A/B test different pages and page lengths and page formats. And like you can test all these things and put these learnings together so that you can end up just determining all these great things. It's not like my boss Tina at Software said liked when I said something about like it's not just A/B testing; it's like A, B, C, all the way to Z testing. Like there's so many things you can test, and a lot of people are not paying attention to it. And I think that's the coolest part. Is like if you can pay attention to pieces of data that no one else is paying attention to, then you can do something that no one else is able to do because of it.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. You have to look at the funnel in terms of, and again, this is one of those things that a lot of organizations don't like thinking of donors in a sales funnel, but let's just go with it because in essence we're trying to create them as donors and participants in your story. So if you have a problem of reach, you address that in a certain capacity, right? And that's like, what are people looking at? What are people engaging in? And social media is one of those top of funnel spaces where if you're getting people to pay attention and see what it is you're doing, that's a good step one. And then step two starts to be engagement. And like you said, that starts to get a little trickier where they're not just pausing and looking at it, but they're sharing it, they're commenting, they're liking. Um, Moving into that mid funnel, I think that's one of the richest places where testing is really important. if you've got people coming, now you can look to see what are we doing to make sure that not just 1 out of 100 come and engage with us, but 1 out of 10, right? End up coming to do something, clicking on a link and coming to the site, right? You can you can easily engage more people but quickly mess something up, like, but we didn't ask them to come to the site to learn more. We didn't have a link to actually draw them back in where we have gated content or we have a donor button. And so as much as we got engagement, when you look down at the bottom of the funnel, it may not have done what you needed it to do. So I love that idea that if you've always got your eye at the bottom of the funnel, then you work your way back up and you go, hey, let's A/B test which of these types of posts brings those people in? What type of campaign brings those people in? What type of marketing brings those people in? And I'll even say, doing this as an agency for clients and doing it for a product, right? We have the same problem, right? To have all that data crystal clear to where it's like, okay, we got this many signups for our product. Where did they come from? And which ones actually became valuable clients versus clients who kicked the tires and left. So data is kind of tricky, but if you have that data, then to work your way back up and go, okay, great, they're coming from content. We're putting good content out there. They're finding it. They find it valuable and they come use our product. But what type of content? Is it content where you're showing them other products? Is it content where you're showing them how to do the form builder? Is it content where you're just encouraging them and showing them, examples of work in the space? All of those things, if you study them the way you did and you take the right pieces of each one, it's this tone, these types of images, this platform, and you don't boil the ocean, which we're going to get to later, I think, in our conversation, right? You find the way to invest in the thing that's working, I think, versus trying to just do all things and be all things to all people. It's not a great way to grow a business. And the way you're talking about it, I think, is definitely a way to capitalize and maximize what it is you're getting in return.
Yeah, I mean, let's start there, right? Like, how do you not like waste all your time looking at all these different things that end up not getting results for you? And I think a really easy way to start is to just simply start like scroll through your Instagram feeds, like look through your emails and which ones got opens, look at your landing pages and so forth, and just start comparing them. So let's take Instagram again for a second. I know that I talked about all those little details and I have them in like big spreadsheets full of numbers and stuff like that, like really nerdy. And instead, like you could simply just pull up in your feed and start scrolling through and see like, oh, that one got more engagements. This one got more comments and shares. This one didn't get as many, and start to just piece together little components. Okay, well, it was normally videos that actually are getting more engagement than our photos are. It's usually videos that are actually, under 30 seconds, and are we posted them as reels? It's actually those that we ended up also sharing as a story, like, or you just start to kind of piece together things. It was the longer descriptions or it was the shorter descriptions, like captions and so forth. If you just start kind of anecdotally putting together some of these things, you'll start to be able to make small changes that will merit you digging deeper, right? So if you start to see an increase in that kind of engagement, you start to see an increase in conversions to donations on landing pages because of those small changes you're making, it'll merit you saying, now let's spend a little more time. Like, let's get even more curious. Like, let's just keep figuring out what's working here, what could work better. And you start to keep repeating what's working, but changing it a little bit, changing it each time, always treating everything as a new A/B test, treating everything as an opportunity to test and learn something, And I think that's a really good way to simply start that as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think in that testing too, I think where that takes you is this place of prioritizing, right? And I think I'd be the first to admit our prioritization as an agency and as a platform have not been in some of the areas we're talking about, right? Social media. We do not have a big social following, and there's rationale for that, for better, for worse, right? As an agency, we recognize our relationships, our personal relationships, our referral relationships with our clients was where our work was coming from. And so we deprioritized how much effort we were putting into social media and things like that. And honestly,
Absolutely.
over the years with algorithm changes and stuff, you can definitely see that, right? And you can always look at it and go back. And I have that temptation too, to boil the ocean. Why haven't we had more followers? Why aren't we having more engagement? It's like, well, this was one of the things that we decided as an agency was not a place that was growing either our network of good relationships with designers and developers, but it also wasn't bringing us projects, right? Our in-person relationships, our conversations, our brainstorming sessions, like our more internal network was what was actually doing that for us, and the content we were putting out more on our blog. And so that's a good example, I think, of where you have to say, look, we can't do all things. We saw results in other areas, and we decided this is the area where we need to be spending our time. Now, the flip side of that is there's definitely a baseline, kind of a pay to play, where if you're going to be on the platforms, you're going to be places, there's a certain amount you want to do. So you can't necessarily close the doors, but I would encourage organizations to prioritize and define those priorities, and not feel stuck or feel like you have to go back and exist at 100% on every channel, on every platform. It's okay to not do that, to find the places where you succeed and focus on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as we think about like getting together, I know next we want to talk about campaigns and what those structures look like. So I'll let you set that up, but like I think it really I'm excited to share even more about like how you can let each channel do what it's best at and not try to be everything everywhere and so forth. So I'll let you set
Yeah.
up what you're thinking, but I think it's a great conversation point.
Well, yeah, and maybe it can kind of fit its way into this, right? So what we had discussed, rather than just kind of going back and forth, what could Cameron and I come up with here that would be valuable to different organizations, large, small, kind of in our wheelhouse of expertise. And this idea of organizations needing to fundraise on a regular basis, needing to run campaigns, was there something we could brainstorm collectively that was a jumping off point or a kind of a foundation for organizations that just needed to try something new, right? So we talked about that 80-20 rule. What is that 20? That 20 is trying something new on social media, that's running a paid media campaign, that's launching a different type of Giving Tuesday or end of year campaign. So we want to spend a little bit of time thinking about what are the core components of a fundraising campaign, right? What needs to be in there? What are the pieces, and what could the two of us provide that would allow you to get started on the 50-yard line? I try not to use football analogies, but I can't seem to stay away from them, and I don't even like football. Um, so how do we create that thing that's for you? So we'll kind of open the conversation back to you, Cameron. Like, what are the key elements when you get started and we say, hey, we've got a start date, end date, we need to run a campaign. We're going to leave what's working to the side, right? You're generating your revenue, but we need to try something new. What are some of those components that you always fight to solidify when you're doing a campaign? Let's start there and see if we can start to package up a list and maybe come up with a skeleton for what we can provide people.
Yeah, I mean the first thing I'd start with is to start early if you can, right? And so uh, the best campaigns I've seen over the years that have raised millions or tens of millions of dollars, like they were ones that were planned out a year in advance if possible, right? And we started not just asking for donations, but we started promoting throughout the year. I think of uh, campaigns that were about like child trafficking, or those that were about fundraising to build homes in a certain community, or those that were about other human rights violations and all kinds of things. Instead of waiting until you're asking for a donation, like start talking about this issue, start talking about this specific community you're serving, start talking about the problem that needs to be solved early on in the year. As an education piece, have landing pages on your website, have content that people are going to find through search and find you and opt in to your email list because of that. Find ways to promote content of successes in those same areas, like rescues from those areas, or wells dug, or ways, stories of families and people who you've helped and so forth, that the donors have helped, right? Start sharing that throughout the year so people know that this is something that you need to address. And then well, let's just skip to like, all right, if you haven't had the time to do anything ahead of time, then I would also say like still find ways to integrate that content into your strategy. Don't just ask, right? Find ways to use that celebration content where you're showing your impact and you're thanking donors throughout your campaign as well, especially leading up to it. Say you're a year, but you have a couple months. Start thanking people now, showing people impact now, so that when you do ask, it'll be much stronger. So, for instance, we did some tests to determine that if we had sent enough emails just thanking people and showing their impact, sharing stories of change and so forth, and thanking donors in that process. That when a campaign came, we could send far more emails, as many as 4 emails in one day. Like say on Giving Tuesday or the end of the year or the last day of a campaign, we sent 4 emails without increasing our unsubscribe rates. They stayed the same, and every subsequent email got more donations because of it. So we were able to kind of like prime the pump and justify, like, we earned it. We earned talking about it more, which was really great. With if you can um, use your channels for what they're meant to be. So I mentioned organic social a lot because, well, when I started my career doing it, right? But also because it's actually not a place that is really great for conversions outside of like people doing fundraisers on on the platforms, like I mentioned, at
Mm-hmm.
SSS. Like I see them as a great way to build community and to reach a lot of people. Is that is your warmed audience, and then you use paid social, you use paid search, you use campaigns where you're running ads to retarget the people who have been to your website and been to your donation page and been to the relevant pages on your website that had to do with your campaign, that watched certain videos on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and so forth, and you retarget the people who have shown interest in this specific cause that you're getting ready to ask funds for. And so that's the best way to do it, right? Is
Yeah.
if you can kind of use each of these places, your website, your social, your all these other things, as not just it's not just content. It's actually like these digital stepping stones for people who have said, "Oh, I know a little bit more about this. Like, I actually know the story of that community where you're building the home because I watched half of that video, and I know about this new type of work that you're taking on because I read the article on your website about it." Well, that's you being able to now create those audiences of people
Mm-hmm.
who are really familiar with it. And now you can retarget them, asking them for a donation. And because you've been warming them, you've earned being able to ask more
Yeah.
directly, and you'll see more donations.
Yeah, that's a great example of like data already putting our minds in a similar place, which is when we go to social media and try to convert with ads, it's going to be a struggle, right? Your conversion rates are going to be pretty low. But if you've nurtured them and you utilize your paid budgets for something more mid funnel, where you're using paid to remarket to them, that's at a point where they've seen value from you and are more willing to support you, right? So this is a space where there's a lot of ways you can A/B test that, but our brains are already in a place where we could craft the skeleton of this where the things we've seen succeeding are going to put you really far down the field already in terms of having to start from scratch and learn all this. I took a bunch of notes as you were typing because I want this to become, sorry, while you were talking, because I want this to be tangible, right? So the first thing you touched on was getting ahead early. So we've got a timeline. So maybe it's providing a structure for how something like this needs to work, where you've got a discovery phase, then you need to kind of know your strategy and the core components of the audience, the messaging. Then there's we talked a bit about like content calendars, channel strategy. I think there's a document I'm shaping in my head that gives a bit of this. That if we can make some assumptions, if we could say, hey, look, this is a campaign for high net worth donors or your grassroots donors, right? Here's what we know. We know they
Mm-hmm.
go to the following platforms, and you may need to work that a bit as an individual organization. We may push TikTok, and you may say, "Hey, we don't have it," but I think collectively we know roughly where those people are. We know the types of things that need to be communicated, that we can put a go to market together that is pretty far along, that an organization could pick up and kind of say, "Hey, I'm going to work with this." Those aren't the 5 emails I'm going to send, but that's a great sequence. And that's a great series of 3 to 5 social posts. I'll back off to 2 because I do a lot of other posts already. But that's what I'm trying to think through. And I think we could really deliver something great. So we'll give everybody a spot to kind of sign up for this. But love to just keep chatting this through and see if we can land on something. I'm also thinking too about the conversion. So all of this build up, all of the paid ads, a big part
Mm-hmm.
of it, and I talked with Adam Dolan from First Spark Digital a week or so ago around how critical they see that landing page being. You talk a lot about A/B testing the different pieces of the top of funnel. For paid media, you can A/B test all the ads, but the most critical thing is if you get somebody to click, that landing page has to be as dialed in as possible. Otherwise, you're spending all this money to get in front of people and it's not working.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk a little bit more about that landing page experience, right? What have you seen really valuable, or what do you think is critical so that when we do finally get their attention and bring them over, what does that page need to do? What does that page have on it? What does that experience look like in your mind?
Yeah. So I think probably the most important thing is that you're continually testing and updating. So like for instance, we did historically, like I've seen what pages that if they had a video, people would spend more time on the page and not actually give, and so we wanted to remove the videos. But then most recently, I did a campaign, and we did that test again, and we found that it was actually the page with the video that people were more likely to give to because it gave them more information. It was a pretty light page, so there wasn't a lot for them to read, and so they needed that video in order to convert. And so we made the switch to the page with the video, and then added some other context as well.
Mm,
But over time, it was an evolving page, and I think that's what's really important. Is that I could tell you what I've seen work, with other pages. I could also tell you what I've seen work, um, most recently. But you should be learning that yourself in your testing phases. So the things that you should test are the messaging. Like that's probably been the most important things to make sure that you're connecting with people. What is the problem? Why they should care about it? Why should they care about it now? And then and so often it's just we miss that because we think, well, people will just care because it's important, but we haven't given them a compelling reason and a compelling narrative. Whenever possible, it's obviously great to be able to share a story of somebody who encountered the same thing to show what it was like in a scenario where someone did receive the help of your organization, and those that haven't, and those that are still out there that still need help. Um, and you can do that sometimes through a video. You can also just do that through the messaging on the page. It's important that you have calls to action throughout. That you have one at the top of the page, what's called above the fold, before someone scrolls. You need to have a button there. You could even use like a sticky button if your platform allows for it. The top right, the middle of the page at the top is a great spot for it as well. And then throughout, like you want to make sure that you have one or more in the middle. And as you're scrolling down to the bottom, the last thing is another call to action to give, and that you've made a compelling case before each of those buttons. It's not just like have a button. You should make sure that you've built up, you're doing some storytelling, and you've built up to an ask, and then you do some more storytelling and you build up to your final ask or something along those lines.
yeah.
But you might have a page that doesn't have 3 calls to action because it's actually so small that like you don't need that. Again, that's where you test and determine, do people want to get to this page and read a bunch, or have you already done that work on the ad side, or because you're actually talking to an audience that you've been engaging with over the last 6 months, telling them about this. They actually know the problem. They know why. This is now the time to give. Make it as easy as possible for them to give, and make it a really like tight page that just gives them the option to donate. So those are the things to test while you're using that evolving page as you're testing it and learning
Yeah, I
and
love that.
optimizing it.
Yeah, it's all good. I mean, the only things I thought of, one, I love the why now. I think, especially in a world where there's just so many competing causes, it's easy for organizations to think like, oh, they're going to understand how critical our cause is. Two ways that I think they don't get that right is they don't start with the problem enough in understanding why it's so critical, and to a point why it's more critical than the 100 other things
Mm-hmm.
you have in your life. Somebody that you know is in the hospital, your kid's
Yeah.
school that needs funding. There's just every donor you've got is being bombarded these days. And so the problem has to feel big enough. The 1 in 3, 1 in 2 people are going to deal with cancer in their lifetime, or the number of
Yeah.
people who are, still enslaved in the world. And again, there's even persuasion
Mm-hmm.
techniques inside of that. Big numbers don't tend to do as much as individual stories. So there's a lot to unpack in that as well that we won't quite get to. But the idea is you really have to pull the heartstrings to ensure people know there's a huge problem here, and then get out of that really quickly to a place of hope that your
Yeah.
organization is bringing, right? There's, if you know how to tell a story, that's kind of core components of it, is just this idea of a setting and in a place where somebody in your story can't get out of, and you come in as either the guide or the person. I'm in this scenario pulling from the Donald Miller, the kind of story brand angle, but
Sure.
um, that idea of telling a rich story is so critical. And with Invisible Children, I think when I look back, I think it's one of the things that that organization did in a way that I have not seen anybody else do, is to bring you to a place where you could not feel worse about something humanity was doing to children, like abducting children from families
Mhm.
and either taking them from their family or in some instances making them kill their own families to become a soldier for an army is like you just couldn't
Mhm.
fathom. And it was so hard, but so quickly it was like, but this is what we're doing to stop it. These are the things that we're doing. These are the radio towers that we're building. These are the flyers we're dropping, from literally flying over this jungle and dropping into the jungle to show these people, like, come home. Like, if you can escape this, it's all a lie. Like, we're here and we're ready to take you back. Like, it just, you have to get from that terrible place to a place of hope. So I think this is all really beautiful, telling the proof, telling those stories. I think there's also a
Mhm.
version of this that leans on this idea of action, right? A donor feed or something that shows you this is happening now. We're not tricking you. These are a bunch of people that are supporting this right now. These are friends. This is activity that's happening. There's a donor that just gave near you. All of that stuff too just helps you realize it's something you want to be a part of. It's that fear of missing out, that this great movement is going to happen and you will have stood by and watched it, right? So I think when you talk about the stories, like that kind of came to mind for me as well. It's just another way that's, to me, I bucket those both as like proof of concept, right? And I think this culture's kind of been trained to be a little skeptical, right? You see a product, you see something on Amazon, you see something on Instagram, and you're a little like, is it going to be what you're saying it's going to be? So those personal stories, the footage on the ground, the donor feed, the thermostat showing how much has been raised, I think is all stuff that helps that like skepticism radar kind of settle
Mhm.
down a bit and let you dream, let you be part of this. Oh my gosh, like, this is something that could actually save somebody. We did a lot of work with IJM too, and to watch the videos of people actually being
Mhm.
saved in those raids, in like whether it's in Cambodia or something, saving somebody from slavery, is like, this is like really happening. This is a real problem, and that proof was needed almost to be like, oh my gosh, I'm all in on supporting the work that this
Yeah.
organization does because of what I'm now witnessing. So really backing all that, and I think again we got to see how we can package this up, but I think all of this um, is what almost every organization and every campaign needs to do. Pick a person, pick a story that we're going to tell them, pitch them, recognize they got a lot of other things that they probably could give to, but we need to win them over, bring them to the cause, and find a way to activate them on this, or at bare minimum, bring them into the story. If they don't give to this campaign, they may give to the next. But I think that we could build something that would really provide at least a framework of where people could start if we package this all together. So I think that'll be really fun.
And if you do these things right too, it's not even just converting somebody to become a donor for you. It's finding the people who really care about this and just
Yeah.
making it as easy as possible for them to be a part of this movement. You know what I mean? Like some of these steps with like optimizing landing page conversions and like donation processes and all kinds of things. Like it's about making it easier because there are people who really do care about this. And I also like that you mentioned like being a part of something community like to bring it back to SSS, like one of the things that is done for each of the challenges that we do, we create these like Facebook groups around each new challenge and invite people in to like encourage others who are doing it, encourage others who are like trying to run that 100 miles this month, or do those different things, do all those push-ups, do like a some kind of ruck or challenge or whatever it is, right? Like they're a part of a
Mm.
community of people who are all there encouraging something. They're a part of something. They're making a difference. They're doing something that's like hard to do. Like you can get people to feel like they can do something that's not just giving. Like that's why I love that they're doing this challenge as well. I love if we've done petitions in the past. I love when we've asked people to come and like talk to political officials, or we've asked people to play video games and fundraise for us, like just whatever it is, right? There's so many ways that we can ask people to be a part of something and have them feel like they're making a difference, not just by giving, but because we've given them that space. And I think Invisible Children is like a prime example of that, with 2012
Yeah.
and everything, like because they had that place to to be a part of it, then they did want to give and they did want to invite others to give as well.
Yeah. And I think now more than ever, that idea of community is sought after. I think they're talking about this idea of what's actually physically harming us these days. It's not smoking. It's a lot. It's this idea, this epidemic of loneliness, right? That we have moved from places of interaction in society into our phones, into our TV screens. Um, and young people have far less hours together than we did as we were growing up. And we also have that
Mm.
in society in the way we're treating elderly, that they have far more time alone. And I don't know what systemic systems have gotten us here, but what we can see is that this idea of community and trying to combat loneliness is bigger now than it ever has been. So for people, for organizations who want to deliver something back, this idea that you have a story that people can build community around, that's an amazing deliverable. It's an amazing thing that you can give people, whether that's in person
Mm.
or that's just to be in the community of supporters, to where when they get those emails from you, they feel like, hey, this is me providing this work. Uh, that's such a huge thing that you can offer people. So I think that's worth keeping in mind. We probably should have said it at the beginning around what's new. I think that's a big part of it, right? We're in a world where people are craving community, and that's something that organizations with a good cause can really deliver.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we're pushing up on an hour. Did we miss anything? Is there anything else that you feel like we should have talked about that we didn't?
I can't think of anything. I'm just gonna close my window here real quick.
Yeah.
Um, no, I think all right.
Get
All right.
blasted in the
No, I
eyes.
think
Think we're
no,
good?
right?
Well, let's
Yeah,
at
I
least
think
do a little sign off and let people know where they can get a hold of you. Obviously, in the video
cool.
description, we'll throw Cameron's LinkedIn information. But anything else you want to tell people in terms of staying connected with you and the work you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, just to tap on that, like LinkedIn, I love building community there and sharing what I've learned and just getting to end up having like digital coffees with people and get to know others and learn from each other. Like I think it's been so valuable to create some real community on there, and so would love to connect there. And then I also have some great resources on my website at cambartlett.com. There's a page on SEO and a page on ads and you know websites, impact reports, all kinds of things like that. And so I'm happy to share those resources as well. So yeah, but this has been a wonderful job. I'm so glad we get a chance to talk and work through some of this stuff and even build out like our own little plan here for campaigns. And I thought it was really really great to get a chance to talk through this stuff.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Well, thanks for your time. And same on our side, 1550.org and donately.com. Check out the products, services we have, and a lot of resources on just helping you do better with your fundraising efforts. Cameron, it's been a lot of fun, and we'll be in touch.
All right, we'll talk soon. Bye.
Cheers.